How you doing? This is Coach DeCarlo. Today we're going to be talking about manifest states. Now, many of you would say, well, what does that mean? Well, we're talking about moving from state to state, but in a particular state, what I'm challenging you to do is to be more mindful of the state that you're manifesting in. It says, as you sow, so shall you reap. It really doesn't matter what's being sowed, there's always going to be a harvest of mind. The challenge is being more mindful of the state that we're in when we're manifesting. What do I mean by that? Often I will speak with clients and they will have the same experience after the same experience. They'll continue to meet the same type of people, get into the same type of relationships, do the same thing with money, have the same health issues after experiencing a victory. Many of them would say, listen, coach, I used to be really good at manifesting, but now I'm not manifesting anymore. The truth of the matter is, you're always manifesting. The goal is to become more conscious of our manifesting. Now, someone asked me recently, Mr. Lindo often will say, think only what's lovely and of a good report. And he says, Coach, let me ask you this. Are you able to do that 100% of the time? The answer is absolutely not. No one is, but more is better. When we begin catching our thoughts, positive and negative, and we begin celebrating the positive and discounting the negative. And what do I mean by that? When we catch a negative, we replace it with something else, but we don't sit there and dance with the negative ideal. We let that ideal go and we begin focusing our mind in the direction that we desire to go. And like I said, nobody's successful 100% of the time, but the goal is more is better. So now, when we're talking about manifesting, we have to be mindful of the state in which we're manifesting. So, for example, a person goes to a coach and they want to manifest their SP, their specific person, somebody they're interested, whatever you want to call it, and they're in a very depressed state. The coach gives them some tools, and in this case, they're successful in manifesting their SP. The challenge with that is that because they've manifested their SP in a depressed state, there's certain things that we're not going to be mindful of or look for when we're interacting with this person because we're so happy with this person. So if their tone is abusive or if they're not nice to us, then we say, well, I'm just happy to have this person in my life. But if you come into that relationship and you're in a love relationship with yourself and you manifest, let's just simplify it and say you manifest love in your life. So you manifest love in your life, but first and foremost, you're loving yourself. Then you're more apt to see things that don't line up with love. And so if somebody's not kind to you, then you can set the standard and say, listen, that's not acceptable. But if you come from a place of low self esteem, for example, then you're more apt to tolerate bad behavior. And the same with money. A person wins a lottery win. Now all of a sudden they've manifested all this money in their lives, but they manifested it in a place of lack. And so over a short period of time, all of the money that they've won is lost. And it's because they never got into a vibration of abundance. And what do I mean by that? They never saw themselves as a manager of their resources. They still acted from a place of lack and they spent freely, as it were, without regards to where the money was going. They had things going on in their life that did not line up with their highest good. So they weren't managing the gift that the universe gave them. And likewise in relationships or health. Someone is cured of a debilitating disease, but they go back into the habits that placed them in the situation where they had the disease the first time. They didn't change any of their eating habits. They didn't change any of their dietary habits. They didn't start exercising. They didn't drink more water. They didn't do the basics that they needed to do just to maintain this earth suit called a body. But understand with this earth suit called a body, it's also an organic machine, and it feeds off of food, oxygen, water, and the likes. So if you're not giving your body, these substances, and you're only thinking in your head, but you're not taking the necessary steps physically, then you can find yourself back in the same place. The master teacher would often say when he healed somebody, go ye and sin no more. I was explaining to someone about sin recently, and I said, listen, sin is not the evil word that church has made sin out to be. Sin simply means missing one's mark. So, as Mr. Lindell said in one of our talks, if the mark was robbing a bank, now we're not advocating robbing a bank, but hypothetically, if the mark was robbing a bank and the bank robber was successful as far as robbing the bank, he did not sin. Now, I'm not saying that he did not commit a wrong act. What I'm saying is, as far as hitting his target of robbing the bank, he was successful. We're not linking good or bad, evil or good. We're just saying that as far as hitting your target, say that your target was running a marathon. You came up short on that marathon, the last mile. Then, of course, at that point, you were in sin. Now, hypothetically speaking, let's say this, that your goal was only to run a half a marathon, but you did 25 miles instead. Then, of course, at that point, you've made the mark or you hit your target, your bullseye. So when we're talking about sin, we're talking about someone that wants to think what's lovely and of a good report. And all of a sudden they're distracted and they get upset with someone. So now they start thinking these bad thoughts about the individual. At that moment, they're off their target. So at that point, they're in a place of sin. We're not talking good or evil, bad or good. We're just talking about hitting your target of what it is that you want to think about. Say that you set a list of goals for yourself and you checked off every one of those goals at the end of the day. Then you hit your target of the goals. But say that a couple of those goals weren't hit. Then at that point, you missed your target, you were in sin. We're not equating this with evil or good or bad. We're just saying simply you missed your target. This is simply what sin means. When you look up the word sin in the concordance, it means missing one's mark. Evil means missing the target altogether. So when we're off track with our thinking and we're not thinking in a line with what it is that we want to be, do, or have, then at that moment we're operating from a place of sin. We're missing our mark. So now what does this have to do with manifesting states? If you're in a state of lack and you attract to yourself abundance, because you're in a state of lack, you're going to find a way to lose the abundance that you have unless you can get into a new state of awareness, new state of consciousness, and you can begin clothing yourself in a mindset of prosperity. We can do that at any time. Just because we attracted something into our lives in a erroneous state doesn't mean that that state can't be changed. Now, understand this, because you attracted, let's say, your love interest in a depressed state, when you come out of that state, you may find yourself no longer requiring that individual because now you've risen to a higher state of consciousness. You may decide to be with that individual. The problem may be because you've risen to a higher state of consciousness. They were used to your lower state of consciousness. They may decide that this relationship isn't for them. I just want you to be mindful when you're in the process of manifesting anything in your life, what state am I in? Because I myself have manifested things in the wrong state. And after manifesting those things, regretted having those things because of the state I was occupying. After I came into the awareness of the state that I was occupying, I found myself not really needing those things, no longer in my life because, of course, I rose to a different state of consciousness. And likewise will happen with you. When we rise from one state of consciousness or when we move from one state of consciousness to another, we'll find that in the newer state of consciousness, some of the things that we required in the old state of consciousness are no longer required. So, just as a creator, I'm challenging you to just be mindful when manifesting the state that you're occupying, because it's possible to manifest the things that you desire, but because of the state you were in, you will continue to attract to yourself the elements of an undesired state. It's important that we rise in consciousness to the appropriate state of consciousness so that we can have what it is that we desire. Remember this, creators, that only you can create your perfect world, not God or man. Only you can create your perfect world. This is Coach DeCarlo saying have a great and abundant day.